Welcome back, everyone. Here we are. Can you believe it? We've made it to chapter 11 in your textbook, Give Me Liberty by Dr. Eric Foner. This chapter is entitled The Peculiar Institution. The first section of this chapter is Slavery and the Economy. The focus question for this section is, how did slavery shape the economic relations in the antebellum, which means pre-war, in this case pre-Civil War, United States? As we have discussed in previous lectures, just when the institution of slavery appeared to most to be fading from economic importance, Eli Whitney's cotton gin caused cotton production to increase dramatically, and cotton quickly became the dominant export crop in the United States. Cotton production drove the re-entrenchment of slavery as a vital, according to those that produced cotton, economic and social institution in the South. It became known as that peculiar institution of the South after northern states abolished slavery. The Old South, the antebellum southern United States, was the largest and most powerful slave society of the modern world. 3/4, about 75% of the world's cotton supply came from the southern United States. Powered textile mills in both the northern United States and in Great Britain, a fact of no small importance, and helped fuel the rise of the Industrial Revolution itself. Although the cotton gin was a labor-saving device that reduced at least a portion of the labor necessary to produce cotton, which is what facilitated the rise in cotton production to start with, cotton production was still very much a labor-intensive process. The planting, the sowing, and most importantly, the harvesting of cotton still required large amounts of hands, of physical labor to produce. There had still yet to be any sort of mechanized process for the production, harvesting of cotton itself. Therefore, still needed lots of laborers to produce cotton. Now, the U.S. had outlawed the foreign slave trade in 1808. And although an illegal international slave trade continued after that date, which did supply a small percentage of the slaves to the U.S. South, the majority of the slaves in the South came from an internal slave trade in the United States. To meet the demand for slaves in the burgeoning cotton economies of the Deep South, the part of the South that was expanding westward, a massive internal domestic slave trade developed. This has been known by historians as the Second Middle Passage. The first Middle Passage, of course, being the transatlantic voyage of the slaves from Africa. Older slave states like Virginia, where climates and soils were not so conducive to cotton production, came to rely on the profits from the domestic slave trade to continue their economic success in the region. Make no mistake about it, the South was not the only region of the United States to benefit from cotton production and slavery. The North reaped its fair share of benefits from this as well. Northern merchants and manufacturers participated in the slave economy and shared in its profits. The profits from cotton production led to the North's industrial development and financed massive internal improvements in those regions. Railroads, canals, roads proliferated in the North and further integrated the northern economies as well. Northern shipping, northern banking, and of course textile manufacturing relied on large amounts of southern cotton, and northern capital funded the southern plantations that provided that cotton to those industries in the North. In addition, make no mistake that the South was some sort of monolith that shared the same economic, social, and cultural patterns across the entire region. The South can really be divided into two distinct regions, the Upper South and the Lower or Deep South. Now, the Upper South, which consists of North Carolina, Virginia, Maryland, Delaware, Kentucky, Tennessee, Missouri, and Arkansas, was slightly different from its Deeper South neighbors. Slave owners made up a smaller percentage of the population in those areas. There was some industrial development and more diversified economies in those regions. The Upper South really can be seen as sort of a middle ground between the plantation-focused culture, society, and economies of the Deep South and the more commercial and industrialized societies of the North. Now, the Deep South, which consists of South Carolina, Georgia, Florida, Alabama, Mississippi, Louisiana, and by the end of the 1840s, Texas, cotton was king. It was the primary focus of the entire economy, and the plantation really became the centerpiece, the focal point of the entire social and cultural milieu in those regions. It had less industry. There was little urban growth outside of the small urban centers like Charleston and Savannah and New Orleans. There was less infrastructure, less roads, less railroads, less canals. Really, the importance of cotton and the importance of slavery and the profitability of those things greatly diminished industrial and commercial development in those regions, which led to many, particularly outside of that region, to see the South in general and the Deep South in particular as somehow backwards and less developed and less advanced, which was true to a degree. Alright, gang, that does it for part 1 of our Chapter 11 lecture series. As always, study hard, and I'll see you soon.